Hi, how you doing? I'm Sharon. I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. This is my Sask Garden, where I hope to pass along plant and garden related advice specific to cold zone gardening. Today I want to talk about fall cleanup. So just like that, we're in hoodies and cold weather gear. It sure happens fast, it seems. It feels like yesterday we were in shorts and t-shirts, but that's the season. One of the things that I try to get done every year before the snow flies, or hopefully before winter sets in, is to cut back the peony foliage. It's always been recommended by professional peony growers and by peony associations and people in the know to cut back all the foliage in the fall after the first frost. And the reason for that is because there's many diseases and problems that can be prevented by cutting back the foliage. One of those is botrytis blight. I think botrytis blight is also called gray mold. And there's other fungus problems and diseases that can happen. So cutting back that foliage is really good to prevent it from getting on the soil and spreading. I've already cut my peonies just a few days ago, and you see that I leave about 3 inches of stem. And the reason I do that is I don't want to get in too much closer because there's buds there for next year. And you don't want to get in too close to risk damaging those buds. At the same time, when I cut them back, I come in and I remove any of this foliage, any of these dead stems that come up fairly easily. I'll also remove lots of leaves that might be in there or anything like that. You don't want a whole lot of debris in there that can decompose and turn into soil and start building up more soil on top of your peony. Peonies need to be at a specific depth in order for them to bloom properly. If they start getting buried by too much soil or debris, they may not bloom properly. Peonies are rock solid hardy. You don't need to cover them, and you don't need to leave all of that foliage for winter protection. They will winter just fine, just like that. I also have a couple of tree peonies, and they don't get cut back. The reason that they don't get cut back is because they grow and bloom on the old wood. It's actually a woody stem, so they are just left as is. I have a lot of lilies, and I don't cut those stems down in the fall. The reason I don't cut them down is because in the spring, after winter, they will still be upright and they will just pull out of the ground without any cutting or kneeling down or anything really. I just pull them up. I will clarify that when you pull the stem up, the bulb won't come with it. It just lets loose from the bulb. So don't be worried about that part. At the same time, I cut off most of the daylily foliage, and the reason I do that is because I have quite a few of them, and if I don't, they all get splayed out into just a big mess. They are often not dry in the spring. They're kind of rubbery, and I just find it a whole lot easier to cut them down now instead of in the spring. Today's October 12th, and it's getting to be a little late in the season for digging up and dividing and replanting or transplanting perennials, with 2 notable exceptions, and that is Asiatic lilies and peonies. It's actually the perfect time of year to do both, and a recommended time of year to do both. I do have 2 clumps of Asiatic lilies, nice white ones, that I need to transplant, and I'll be getting to that this week. And like I said, now is the perfect time as well to be digging up and dividing or moving peonies. A word of caution: that peony root ball is going to be wider, deeper, and heavier than you anticipate. In order to dig it up, you have to dig a wide circle around the entire plant, probably starting out oh, I'm going to say at least 8 inches to a foot from where you think the root ball is. It's going to be spread that far out, especially for any plants that have been in the ground for 3 or more years. My peonies have been in the ground here for 25 years, and I honestly don't even want to attempt that because I think I'd have to unearth the whole flower bed in order to get them out. Those peony roots are very brittle, and so if you don't dig up a wide area around and deep, you're going to run the risk of breaking a lot of roots. If you're going to divide your peony, you are going to break roots. You're just going to have to. You're either going to have to saw through it. They're big, solid root balls when they come out of the ground. Very solid. I also have a lot of irises, and I don't cut them back in the fall. You can cut them back by about half and clean them up if you want to clean up your yard and not have this hanging about. But I find that if you cut it back now, I have to go in the spring and do more cleaning anyway. So I just leave it all until then. A lot of the stems will be brown or laying right over, and yeah, I just find it easiest to leave them until spring. If anything is visibly diseased, it is good to cut that foliage away and dispose of it before winter. Hostas, after a few frosts, they shrivel to almost nothing. I don't cut them back in the fall. I leave them until spring, and in the spring, you can pretty much just pull them out with a rake even, or just give them a little yank and the foliage comes off. But I do leave them, and I don't bother cleaning them up in the fall. Some of them do turn a nice fall foliage color, and they still are upright as opposed to those. These are maybe a little bit more protected, and so I do like to leave them just for that interest. And over here, these are still green. These are actually newly planted this year, and they're still looking pretty good. So yeah, I don't cut those back. They stay until spring. If you haven't yet done so, you want to cut back any prolific reseeders before the snow flies. In my yard, that's Heliopsis. I've already cut all those back. I have quite a few. The reason I have quite a few is because I didn't cut them back all the time, so I got quite a bit of reseeding going on. Heliopsis is also called false sunflower. Monkshood is another one I have to make sure that I cut back. They will reseed quite good for me too. Same with the globe thistle or the echinops. These really reseed for me, and I don't really care to have them reseed so much. I'm going to show you this this ladybug heaven here. Now I find that on these globe thistle flowers, just look at all those ladybugs. They were all tucked up under there. So when I cut the flower heads off to prevent the reseeding, I will check to make sure that I'm not getting rid of a whole bunch of ladybugs. Not that I'm lacking any this year. I don't know who's winning the war, the ladybugs or the maple bugs, but there's just hundreds and thousands and millions of all of them. Yeah, look at that.
Gotcha.
Just oodles of them.
Okay. Gotcha.
More reseeders that I have to make sure I take care of before they set their seed is verbascum, sea holly, delphinium, although most of them, if they haven't been cut back by now, they've already spread their seeds. Rudbeckia is another one. If you want the Rudbeckia to reseed, then of course you would just leave it be and let it reseed. I also cut back annual Rudbeckia. I leave the plant because I have found that they are perennial in many cases. So I don't pull them out. I wait until next year to see if they're going to come back. And I've had 2 or 3 plants that have come back for 3 years already. I also let them reseed, but if you don't want them to reseed, then you should be cutting off the flower heads before that happens. This is another prolific reseeder. If you have in your yard, you might want to consider at least taking off the seed heads. It will reseed. It can be a bit of a thug. So if you don't want more of those, I would consider cutting the seed heads off. Behind it is an echinacea. Now I've never had echinacea. I've never been lucky enough to have echinacea reseed. I sort of wish it would, and so I'm not going to cut these seed heads off, but I am going to cut the Rudbeckia seed heads off. You could as well collect that seed and start new plants if you wanted new plants. I mulch with flax straw, and I also leave all the leaf litter. And a lot of the stems that I pull up, I just break and I drop in place. So there is an entire biodiverse ecosystem going on in my backyard when you do that kind of stuff. And there are many places, many places for the bugs to winter. So I'm not too worried about cutting back what I need to cut back. I take all my annuals out of the pots and I throw them on the compost pile. For the big pots, I leave all the root balls intact, and I just leave that and the soil in the big pots. I dump the hanging baskets entirely, soil, foliage and all. I dump them onto the compost pile. So that's how I take care of those. I pull out, if I have any annuals in the ground, I will get rid of those with some exception. And one of them, this is an evening scented stalk plant, and I do the same as my mom used to do in the spring. I let this stay all winter. In the spring it'll just be brown and dry, and then I just take bunches of it and crush it up in my hands and spread the seeds where I want it to grow again. I also clean off all of the vegetable beds. I get rid of all of the dead foliage. I don't compost zucchini, cucumber, melon, potatoes, or tomatoes. Just so, again, not to spread any kind of disease or blight that might be happening in some of those plants that are more susceptible to that kind of problem. So in the veg garden, all of the beds, aside from the carrots, which are still in the ground, all of the beds are cleaned up, tilled, amended, and the garlic is planted. You know, a fox came and buried a duck in my garlic bed, so I had to go ahead and put the straw down earlier than I had planned, as well as the net, just to keep him from coming back. We unearthed the duck, of course, so it isn't left as bait for the fox, but that's what he did, an entire duck. Crazy thing. The other thing that's advisable in the fall, or even before fall actually sets in, is to remove any dead or diseased or dying apples from underneath the apple tree. It helps to prevent your apples from going wormy. So just get rid of all those apples that are rotting under the apple tree to prevent anything like that from happening. Here's another example of leaving the hosta foliage because it's turning such a nice color this fall. So I do like to leave that. On this side is Virginia. It'll sometimes, with the cold weather, turn a really nice bright red color, and that always looks nice. The pulmonaria still looks good. So there's no sense in cutting that back. I think it's nice to get as much as we can out of our growing season. I also don't cut back any of the ornamental grasses at this time of year because this is what they're meant for, this fall interest. It's just beautiful. They may get broken and splayed out a bit in the spring, But I think that having to deal with that at that time is totally worth it because they're just so beautiful now. I just love them. So that's it. So that's it. Thanks very much for watching today. I really do appreciate it. I hope you found it helpful in some way. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thanks again. See you.